Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Welcome. It is Wednesday, November 23rd, 2011. You are tuned in to the Alex Jones Show. Thank you so very much for joining us today on this day before Thanksgiving. I'm going to be wishing you a happy Thanksgiving throughout the show. My name is Mike Adams. I'm the fill-in host for Alex today, who is on the road returning to Austin after filming a number of videos and filing many reports from the road, as you've heard and seen here on the Alex Jones Show and InfoWars Nightly News. Now, today we have just an incredible lineup of news, including coverage of the debate last night, where Ron Paul, well, they gave him more than 89 seconds for starters. Can you imagine that? And he just blew away the competition with some rational, common sense answers to keep us out of wars, to return some fiscal sanity to America, and basically do what's right for the future of our nation. So we're going to be playing some clips for you from that debate, and also bringing you some commentary on that, and covering some of the crazy answers by Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney and all the other globalists there, who are now essentially saying that, hey, the Bill of Rights shouldn't apply to you if we declare some kind of a war, even if it hasn't been legally declared by the Congress. Imagine that. Also today, coming up, we have Paul Craig Roberts will be joining us at the bottom of the hour to talk about tyranny and a concept that we're calling trickle-down tyranny, and what else is going on with the TSA and the world of security. That was also the topic of the debates last night, the CNN presidential debates, Republican nominee debates. We also have coming up today Dr. Stewart, Lonky, who's going to be talking to us about the dangers of environmental toxins that you may not know about. In fact, he's the author of a book called Invisible Killers, and he's here to talk to us about the toxic metals that are found in the environment and in the foods and in industrial processes that we are now taking into our bodies. And I am convinced that much of the insanity that we are seeing in the world today, especially in America, is due to heavy metals poisoning and chemical poisoning. I think it's a topic that we haven't covered enough, and it could explain why so many voters and so many people, so many members of the mass public out there, they seem to be literally insane. I mean, insane, completely irrational, saying things like, oh, let's see, we're $15 trillion in debt. Let's get out of that debt by spending another $5 trillion. Woo, that's brilliance right there. I think it's heavy metals poisoning, or at least that could be part of it. It's got to also be the fluoride. It's got to be related to the vaccines and the pesticides and, all the chemicals that are out there in the food supply and in the environment. So we're going to be talking to Dr. Stewart Lonky to get some answers about that. And if you see me looking at all the notes here, for those of you watching on Prisonplanet.tv, it's just because we have so much to cover today. We've got news that will blow your mind. We've got news about BPA levels spiking 1,200% in the blood of people after they eat canned soup. Yeah, because the lining of the cans contains BPA. That's the hormone-mimicking chemical bisphenol A. It does wonderful things for your body, like giving men breasts, infertility issues related to that, cancer issues related to that. It's crazy. We've also got, let's see here, the turkey fryer terror coming up. The Department of Homeland Security has issued a warning, an alert, red alert. If you fry your turkey, you could set your house on fire. Yes, Janet Napolitano wants to be in your kitchen. That's kind of scary all by itself. Janet, stop eating the turkey. All right, all that and more is coming up here as we return. We've got all kinds of news coming up. We're coming back with more details about the Ron Paul appearance in the debates last night. You are listening to the Alex Jones Show. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this break with more breaking news and analysis. All right, welcome, folks. This is the Alex Jones Show on Wednesday, November 23rd, 2011. I'm the fill-in host today, Mike Adams, the health ranger, the editor of naturalnews.com. And today we're going to be covering just a number of mind-blowing topics. Truly fascinating stuff. This is one of the most info-packed shows I've ever hosted here. Starting off with Ron Paul in the debate last night, where he squared off against Newt Gingrich and other globalists who were all spouting some very scary information about why you shouldn't have your Bill of Rights if they think we're in a war. And we're going to run a little bit of video from that in a minute, but first let me set this up and explain. They started off with a question from Edwin Meese, the former U.S. Attorney General, who begins by really spouting what are a series of lies. He says, there have been 42 terrorist attacks prevented by the Patriot Act. And he says the Patriot Act is a tool that's fundamental to stopping terrorists. And then he asks, shouldn't we have a, quote, long-range extension of the Patriot Act so that these law enforcement officers can continue to use this wonderful, wonderful tool to prevent terrorism? And, of course, predictably, all the other globalists on the stage other than Ron Paul, they agree with Edwin Meese. Now, in his question, though, he didn't tell you the truth. Of these, quote, 42 terrorist attacks that have been prevented by the Patriot Act, probably 41 out of 42 were attacks that were set up by the FBI, right? The FBI goes out there on the record. This is now publicly on the record. The FBI goes out there, creates the plots, recruits the so-called terrorists who are actually normally just innocent people who don't really know what they're involved in. The FBI provides the money, they provide the weapons, they provide the planning, the motivation, the target lists. And then, after they hand this over to these would-be terrorists, magically another branch of the FBI shows up and guess what? They catch them. They catch them. This is like playing cowboys and Indians in your own backyard sandbox, isn't it? Kind of like, okay, you play like the Indians or the terrorists, and we'll play like the cowboys, and we'll act like we catch you. And then we'll report to the media what a great job we're doing stopping terrorism, and we'll use that as a justification to continue the completely illegal Patriot Act, which is a violation at so many levels of basic, fundamental, not just human rights, but, of course, the Bill of Rights. So this was the question that Edwin Meese led off with. It was a loaded question, like using loaded dice in a poker game. And then, of course, Wolf Blitzer added right only that. He said, quote, gee, only this weekend there was an alleged terror plot uncovered in New York City. Oh, my God. Yeah, probably another one set up by the FBI. They can do it more than once, you see. This makes them think they're important. So then Gingrich replies, well, you have to have two sets of laws, really. The Bill of Rights only applies to, quote, criminal investigations. You know, people who rob others or people who commit acts of violence or common crimes. But he says you should have a totally different set of rules when there's a war, when there's national security at risk. You shouldn't have the Bill of Rights at all. I'm paraphrasing him, obviously. He says basically the terror threat will be ongoing, probably through multiple generations. Yeah, because it's working out really well for the globalists to have this scary terror threat out there, even if they have to invent it. And by the way, Paul Craig Roberts is coming up at the bottom of this hour to give us more commentary on that. He wrote a great article a few weeks ago about the complete fabrication of the entire war on terror. That was published at Infowars.com if you want to check that out. But Newt Gingrich goes on to say that you shouldn't have a Bill of Rights if there's a war going on. But you see, who decides if there's a war? It certainly wasn't Congress. They never declared a war. They never debated a declaration of a war, and Ron Paul points this out. But Newt Gingrich and the other globalists apparently think that they can just pronounce a war. Oh, there's a war or a war-like ambiance in the global sphere. And from that, we're going to just subjectively decide that you shouldn't have a Fourth Amendment right anymore, or a First Amendment, as the Occupy Wall Street protesters are finding out, or a Second Amendment, or a due process Fifth Amendment or even 10th Amendment rights for the states. I mean, it just goes on, and it is the most obscene example of just runaway, freedom-grabbing, terror-minded thinking. The philosophy of these people, of these globalists who were on the stage last night on the CNN debate, I tell you, their philosophy, every one of them, except for Ron Paul, their philosophy is identical to the philosophical foundations of Nazi war criminals, all right, who justify their actions by saying, we're at war, so therefore we can do anything. This is what Newt Gingrich seems to be proposing. It's incredible. Let's run some of that video footage of Ron Paul to hear what his answer was to these globalists and their war-mongering, terror-mongering, fear-mongering efforts to scare everybody into giving up their rights. Go ahead with that if you've got it.
I'm Ron Paul, a congressman from Texas. I am pleased to be here at the debate because this is a very important debate, but I am convinced that needless and unnecessary wars are a great detriment. They undermine our prosperity and our liberties. They add to our deficits and they consume our welfare. We should take a careful look at our foreign policy.
Right to the questions.
All right, let's move ahead. This is Wolf Blitzer asking the loaded or handling the loaded question from Edwin Meese. Go ahead about a minute and a half on that or so. In the meantime, let me read you a quote that Ron Paul had that he stated in this debate. He says, quote, I have a personal belief that you never have to give up liberty for security. That's his, and there was applause after he said that. What an amazing concept, huh? You never have to give up your liberty for security. He says, quote, you can still provide security without sacrificing our Bill of Rights. Let's see what else he's got to say. Go ahead.
Bill of Rights.
Yeah, he just said that right there.
I want to bring others in, but do you want to respond, Mr. Speaker?
Yeah. Timothy McVeigh succeeded.
There's Newt Gingrich.
That's the whole point.
If you look at Newt's face during this debate, he's so arrogant how Timothy McVeigh succeeded. Yeah, who set up the Oklahoma City bombing, really? I mean, who was involved in 9/11, really? I mean, come on. Who's setting up all the fake terror plots across America today? It's the FBI. It's the insiders. We know that's going on. Who brought down World Trade Center Building 7? Come on. Demolition style, brought it down. I mean, you know, it's to the point where if you watch that debate, they got a room full of people, hundreds of people, and we'll play more from Ron Paul if you get that queued up there. You've got hundreds of people in there. You've got all these people on stage. You've got Wolf Blitzer asking the questions. The only sane person in the room is Ron Paul. Everybody else there is clinically insane, in my opinion. They are living in an imaginary world where terror threats exist on every street corner. Terrorists are in your kitchen. Terrorists are in your shower. Terrorists are in your luggage. They're hiding in your luggage. And they're hiding down your pants. That's why the TSA has to reach down your pants to check for terrorism. You know, and Ron Paul replies and says, there wasn't a war declared on anybody, and terrorism is a concept, not a person, not a people. Go ahead and roll some more from Ron Paul there. Let's see if we get a good segment here.
That's digging a hole for ourselves. What if they look like Timothy McVeigh? You know, he was pretty tough criminal.
He's talking about profiling here.
Too much carelessness in the use of words that we're at war. I don't remember voting on a declaration of war. Oh, war against terrorism. And terrorism is a tactic. It isn't a person. It isn't a people. So this is a very careless use of words. What about this? Sacrifice liberties because they're terrorists? You're the judge and the jury? No, they're suspects. And they have changed in the DOD budget, they have changed the wording on the definition of Al-Qaeda and Taliban. It's anybody associated with organizations, which means almost anybody can be loosely associated. So that makes all Americans vulnerable. And now we know that American citizens are vulnerable to assassination. So I would be very cautious about protecting the rule of law. It will be a sacrifice that you'll be sorry for.
Herman Cain, let's bring you into this conversation.
Those words should go down in history as the red alert warning from Ron Paul to all free-minded citizens who want to protect the future of their nation here in the United States. He says, again, so I would be very cautious about protecting the rule of law.